Boundaries. Some part of you believes you need to get better at setting boundaries to fix your relationships. But there is one fundamental truth this ignores. If you've struggled with low self-worth your whole life, just saying no feels near impossible. Today I'm going to explore why your self-worth is the biggest limitation in setting boundaries cleanly and how you can develop your self-understanding to set boundaries that actually improve your relationships. So we're going to get cracking. The first thing is the role of self-worth. The truth is, if deep down we believe that our energy, our time, our peace, if we believed all these things mattered deeply and we had clear values about exactly what we'd stand for, we'd never have a problem setting boundaries. We would just simply say no. The problem is most men haven't taken the time to understand what they value, what they expect in relationships. And this isn't our fault, so it's not one to feel bad about. It's very unlikely in most cases that if you're watching this video that you were taught this as a young boy. You will have guys who have this high self-worth and find it very easy to set boundaries. They were lucky enough to be taught this from a young age. But for many of us, we take on this image and the role of a people pleaser, of a nice guy, and this is our way of navigating life, and we believe it's going to be more easy. We let people walk over ourselves, but the negative consequence of this is we feel that resentment, that anger when people do step over our boundaries. And the big challenge here is, and really the problem we face is trying to bridge this gap where we're now this nice guy, we have lower self-worth, we have less boundaries, and those things are intertwined. You then have on the far extreme, you have a high self-worth guy. He doesn't have this problem. He's got high self-worth and it's really easy for him to say no. So that's the fundamental challenge. And how do we get to be this guy? It's my belief that the main limitation here is we don't really have an understanding of what we actually stand for as men and what is important to us and what we accept in relationships. When we've been a nice guy all this time and we also lack this clarity, it's very, very hard to suddenly start setting boundaries without this introspection, without reflecting on that. So I want you to sit down with a journal, pause this video if you need to, and write down the answers to these questions for you. So how do I want people to treat me? A way you can manage this is you look back to a time where someone stepped over the line, they've crossed your boundaries. This will give you great insight into deep down what you don't want to put up with, but that you have been allowing to happen. You also want to get clear on how do I communicate this? You can obviously go down the route where you're shouting at someone. That is a way to express a boundary. It's not going to be very productive. And if you have a specific example of something you won't put up with, then you can actually write out how you would share this with the other person in a constructive way that's also expressing your feelings. We also need to reflect on what actions don't I accept in myself, understanding where you're letting people walk over you, where you're not expressing yourself. So this is all about clarity, and I'm going to share an example from my own life that explains why this is so important. So when I was about 21, I was at university, and my way of operating in the world was being a people pleaser. So one thing I would do when someone was messaging me on WhatsApp, maybe to organize something, I would overcheck the message. I'd be very obsessive and really care about whether they're replying to me, care about whether people are messaging me to hang out. And the problem with that was it was unconscious. This was my action to get some validation and feel higher self-worth from a place of low self-worth. Obviously, that wasn't very sustainable. It had a negative impact on me. I had to reflect on what I would and wouldn't put up with in relationships and what actions don't I accept in myself. So from asking myself these questions, getting a deeper understanding of what was going on in my body and what I was really feeling, I was able to get to a place where I could write out if I'm messaging someone to hang out more than 3 times in a row and I'm faced with rejection, they're not wanting to hang out, then I will leave that friendship. I'm not gonna feel too bad about it. I'm just gonna leave it to them. So that was my boundary that I implemented as a result, and that was life changing. There were a few relationships that I was hanging on to, I was putting so much energy into, and by getting clear on the understanding firstly, I was then able to create the boundaries in my life and let those relationships fade. And I invested my energy into the relationships that really mattered to me, where people were reciprocating, and as a result, my self worth started to climb. It was the first proper boundary in terms of that stage of my life that I put into place, and it had a huge impact. We also want to understand what are my values. So, this is looking at broader issues outside of relationships, but a common thing I've experienced is if someone's breaking rules in public, they're doing something you're not happy with, it's so easy for us to just push that away. And you'll see it if someone's committing a crime in somewhere like the UK, Western countries, people won't really say anything in most cases. And we need to weigh it up. It's a personal decision on what do I value in terms of safety, where do I feel that I need to express myself and feel proud of myself as a result. So it's getting greater clarity on what we stand for in our lives will also make it much easier in that moment where we need to express our boundaries to understand what it is we really stand for, and make it a lot easier to then express ourselves, share our boundaries, and build our self-worth as a result. So let's say you're new to setting boundaries. Most people will do this. You've been a nice guy, a people pleaser. Maybe you've now taken the time to pause the video, reflect on the last slide, and you realize what is important for you. Then quite often, once we've realized as well early in our journey that we're a nice guy, once we realize that truth, it's then very easy to set very hard, often quite generic boundaries, so boundaries that we've maybe heard someone online mentioning, and we set these within existing relationships. So let's try and think of an example. You're in this relationship and you suddenly decide that your girl can't have any guy friends on Instagram, something like that. And it's very common at this stage where we just take on other people's boundaries. We set this very hard line to lose and impact relationships. This is what I did. I came in with this hard line, being a nice guy, and then I'm suddenly discovered this concept of boundaries. I come in super hard, and I think it's part of the journey. We're going to lose and impact some relationships. Some people you're probably not compatible with, but because you've been a nice guy and a people pleaser, you've ended up together. So I think it's part of the journey. But if you have existing relationships, maybe it's a long-term partner, maybe it's your family, you don't want to blow up these relationships. So I would approach it with emotional awareness related to the other person. If you spent years and years in a relationship setting one standard and you come in with a super hard line, you're like, it has to be like this or else, it's not going to end that well, because this person has this expectation of you. You've reacted to them in this nice guy, people pleasing way for so long. They have that expectation of you. So proceed with caution when you're doing that. I think it's you can't try and keep all your relationships the same. This is part of the journey, but do approach it with emotional awareness, because people won't be expecting this. So unavoidable truths about starting to develop this skill of setting boundaries as a result of having this self-understanding. The first thing is people have an expectation of you. You're going to get pushed back. People are going to question you. They're going to doubt you. Why are you suddenly saying this? And it's all about being clear on what you stand for, and also learning what you stand for, which I'll get into shortly. Sometimes you're not always going to set boundaries. You're going to miss that opportunity. You always have a chance to do it next time. You're going to feel those feelings with regret. Actually, the reason I created this video was I had an instance where someone in a men's group, he was asking a question that was super surface level. He does it all the time. I thought about mentioning it before and I hadn't, and I couldn't sleep last night. So this is the consequence of inaction, of not making steps to set our boundaries is we have that regret. We have that feeling of regret. We have anger. Maybe we can't sleep like I couldn't last night. Another thing we need to expect is discomfort. When you stand for setting your boundaries, putting a line in the sand, it's not going to be easy. It's why not everyone sets boundaries, because you're going to have rejection. If you live your life being more of a nice guy, you haven't set boundaries. If you suddenly start doing it, you're going to have an emotional reaction. It's not going to feel easy. And it's going to get easier over time, but there's a level to setting boundaries where you're always aware that someone may respond in a negative way, but that is part of the deal. This is about avoiding the regret, the anger we get when we let people walk over us. It's also an identity shift. If you've had this persona of pleasing people your whole life, it's not going to be an overnight fix, and it has to be something you work on. So that's why having this deeper understanding of what you stand for is massively important. It's going to give you clarity along the way. And there was an interesting truth I discovered over time. We've talked up until now about setting boundaries, drawing a line, and getting clear on what we stand for. Not many people know this, not many people talk about it, but one thing I found is I went into a new relationship with my current girlfriend, and I was very hard on the boundaries. I had a clear idea in my head of what I would stand for. And actually, there's been moments where I've made small exceptions, and that has massively deepened our relationships. The thing with boundaries is they don't have to be rigid all the time. So we have this impression that it's a hard wall, but actually there are exceptions depending on the moods of other people, depending on the context, depending on what's going on. I think it was with my girlfriend where we were in the middle of a conflict, an argument, and both of us sort of wanted to run away. And she actually, I think, based on how we interacted in the relationship, we both wanted to run away. We felt that, right, this is it. We need to go away. And there was an element of ego there, but she actually overstepped the boundary that we normally would have had, and she reached back out to me, and that led to far more bonding than if she had kept the relationship. And there's another example where I did the same. And those things led us to deepening our relationship, greater connection. So I think that's something to bear in mind, that there is flexibility in boundaries. It's not all about hardness and rigidity. There's also flexibility, which is important. So 2 things to try. Hopefully you've already written down exactly what you expect in relationships, your life. Ask what your boundaries are, how you're going to express them. So that's the first thing. Second thing, if a boundary is broken, or even if you're about to set a boundary with someone, reflect on what you would say to that person. Practice going through it. Practice speaking it out. This is what I was doing last night after someone had broken my boundary. I was just practicing what I would say to them next time. We've gotten this habit of people pleasing our whole lives. So there's an element where we literally need to practice being comfortable, even just saying it to ourselves, writing it down. Maybe we can practice with a brother, with a friend, to get comfortable with putting up a boundary, get comfortable with just saying that, because if you get into that habit of practicing it, it's going to be more comfortable when you're in the heat of the moment, when you need to set that boundary. So I hope that's interesting. I hope that was useful, and I will see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.